Hello, it's been a while. Let's jump right back into it. So I have a system that I've created that I think works pretty well. It's a sanity system for D&D 5e. Here's the thing about it. Pretty much stole it straight from Call of Cthulhu. Pretty good sanity system. However, a lot of the sanity system in Call of Cthulhu doesn't translate very well to D&D. There's a couple reasons for that. The main one is that D&D is a highly iterative game, and what that means is the idea is that your players are kind of making decisions and then things kind of reset, and then they make similar decisions with the same tools and so on and so forth, with the expectation that they'll generally get better at that, and then tools get slowly layered on top of that, pretty much just by default. That just kind of happens. This is one of the reasons that D&D works so well with like EXP and leveling as a concept, because EXP and leveling really do a great job because it's a linear progression, more or less. Players sort of have things to look forward to, and they think about how they would integrate that into the way that they use their tool set currently. That gives them a really strong understanding of sort of iterative gameplay, right? Because now they're iterating on the way that they make decisions and solve problems using the tool sets that they have at the time, and then anticipating what would work and what wouldn't. Now, I haven't played Call of Cthulhu nearly as much as I've played 5th edition, but it does have a very different kind of scenario. In Call of Cthulhu, the stretches of time that you're dealing with are much longer. Now, that in and of itself isn't a problem, because you can just say 6 days pass or 6 years pass, and then that happens. But Call of Cthulhu is set up a lot more around building off of things you've done, right? It's a game about investigation. So it's about kind of collecting clues and then figuring things out and unraveling a mystery over time. D&D can be about that narratively as well, but the gameplay isn't really conducive to that, whereas in Call of Cthulhu, it's much more cumulative. So in Call of Cthulhu, sanity is something that's fairly easy to lose but difficult to gain, especially in any large amounts, especially over time. And that's because of the idea is you're sort of slowly going insane as you unravel the mysteries, and the sanity system is the core element of it, or at least one of the really core elements of it. Those of you who are much more familiar with Call of Cthulhu than I am, maybe you have different opinions on that, but it is a really important component in it for sure. Whereas in D&D, if you added a sanity system, you would have to be very careful, because sanity wouldn't be the core component. If you made sanity the core component of the whole game, you'd create a very interesting but weird problem. If you try to implement a sanity system like Call of Cthulhu's directly into 5th edition, a long-term thing, it would be weird, because you could not really make it the foundation of the game long-term, because it would undermine a lot of the short-term decision-making that the players make, which is what D&D is all about, right? All of your spells come back every day, all of your abilities come back, sometimes after an hour of sitting down for a bit. Like, it's pretty easy to get your stuff back, relatively speaking, and that gives you this ability to sort of segment problems, and that's what D&D really does in its system, is it takes problems and it segments them. And that's a really interesting design choice, because it makes for that iterative gameplay, whereas Call of Cthulhu, while it does have little segments, it really is a lot more about how the segments connect and what they're leading toward, whereas in D&D, it's really a lot more about solving this segment. So if you tried to just slap a sanity system in there, like Call of Cthulhu's, that's long-term, you would undermine a lot of the segmented problem solving that the player's doing. This is a huge problem for D&D, because if you do that, so much of what you do is just meaningless. Combats don't matter that much, the decisions you make in combat don't matter that much, and now the idea of like paring down a 6-second round into this thing that takes like at least a few minutes, because you're making really sort of small decisions. You're making decisions by the second, basically. Sure, it works great for 5th edition for what it's trying to do in these like segmented, compartmentalized problems that you're solving. But if you try to add a long-term sanity system, a lot of that breaks down. Those second-to-second decisions are irrelevant enough in the long term that the compartmentalized, iterative gameplay that 5th edition creates starts to kind of break down. So, if I'm trying to take the sanity system from Call of Cthulhu and tweak it, so that it can be properly adjusted to fit into 5th edition. That's the first thing we have to solve. We have to make it so that the effects of sanity, or a lack thereof, are detriments to you in the short term, but also feel long term. This is really important. It has to feel like a long-term thing, otherwise you lose the je ne sais quoi of the system, right? You lose you lose the feeling, you lose that sense of sanity that the Call of Cthulhu sanity system really does a good job of generating. But we don't want to lose that. That's the whole point of taking that system and utilizing it. So how do we keep that, but then make it short-term? Well, I have a system that kind of does that. So it sort of works. It works kind of like hit points, where you have a sanity value and you slowly lose sanity, and you use the same percentile system as Call of Cthulhu, where if you roll above your current sanity, you lose more, and if you roll below it, you lose less. So I like that because the idea is, as your sanity dwindles, it's got a sort of snowball effect. The reason that's so important, did I say... I might have said it backwards, but you want the snowball effect. The point is, you want the snowball effect. The lower your sanity is, the more likely it is you lose more sanity. The reason you want that, because some people will say, well, but then the snowball effect means that if you start getting low on sanity, you just keep getting lower and lower and lower on sanity, and you push your players into a situation where they just lose their sanity and everything is terrible. Sort of. But the reason I think the snowball effect is so important is because I want players to be anticipating the loss of their sanity for as long as possible. The ideal situation is that they stay at low sanity and are terrified of going lower, but never quite hit that 0 point. So in order to do that, just like with the death system, right? So we're taking the Call of Cthulhu sanity system and applying the principles of the 5th edition death save system on top of it to create a sanity-like thing that fits within the 5th edition framework. That's the goal here, and it's working pretty well when I've used it so far. So the idea is, as sanity dwindles, players should feel very anxious about that. They should be worried about their sanity getting low, and that's important. That's the whole point. But we do need some things to happen when their sanity runs out. That's also important. So I've got some of the sanity stuff up on the screen that you can sort of skim. Hopefully, you know, not read too much because I'm talking. Pay attention in class. But I'll also put up a PDF or something so that you can find it. I'll put it in a link in the comments or in the description somewhere. And then you can sort of get a sense of what the sanity system is like and follow along on what the point of it is. Because I don't want to sit here and like read verbatim what the sanity system is. And I've made some changes to this system in the meantime, but mostly numerical things. Don't worry too much about it. Don't worry too much about the details. Worry about how the system creates this feeling. That's the important thing, right? Because I've talked before about tension. And here's the tension. The more you do things that might cause you to lose sanity, the lower your sanity will obviously get. The lower your sanity gets, the less inclined you are to do the things that might lose you sanity. So for example, if I have murder hobo players, which I don't, they would have to really think twice about this because they're gonna start losing sanity as they attack NPCs and stuff. That's a huge problem for them. So now for them, attention might be, well, I wanna fight this NPC because they have stuff I want or whatever their thought process is. And then have the counterweight of that to create tension where there's an obstacle to that, which is, yeah, but you'll lose sanity, and that's going to pose long-term detriments. So you have to be careful. And if you take it outside of the realm of a murder hobo, which I think probably most people don't actually have to deal with murder hobos. I think murder hobos are kind of a much maligned problem that doesn't exist nearly as much as it sounds like it exists. But that's beside the point. Take another example. Let's say you're just bad at talking to people. Well, the attempt to talk to people might represent an increase in sanity in this case, right? Because imagine it like if you have anxiety, the best way to get over that is through exposure. Exposure therapy is the way to do that. So this is not medical advice, by the way. And in D&D, if you take that framework and apply it, then now it's, well, I'm bad at social situations, but by forcing myself into those social situations, we might get more out of that socially if that goes well, even though I'm not expecting it to, but I might get some sanity out of it. So you're creating these kind of interesting tension points where the decisions aren't really in and of themselves most of the time huge decisions, right? Most of these decisions that you're making with regard to sanity aren't, how do I solve this problem right now? It's more about managing a much longer term problem. And by taking that longer term problem and thinking about it in terms of what the Call of Cthulhu sanity system does, which is a longer term problem and creates a foundation for that experience over a long period of time in terms of in-game time. Now you have that in D&D, but because it's not taking the forefront, because it's not the main thing that you're having to deal with, because it doesn't specifically affect all of the little decisions that you're making in any given moment, it creates this sort of undercurrent of tension that pokes up here and there. And I have things like, if your ally falls unconscious, you lose sanity. Not if they die, if they fall unconscious. Why is that? Well, that creates a new kind of tension, because in D&D, some players have figured out that, hey, by the way, falling unconscious is far from a death sentence. You can fall unconscious and get revived like every round and just like have this whack-a-mole system going. That can happen. But with sanity, that can happen, yes, but the players are worried about it happening now. There is a specific and clear detriment to that happening. So hopefully what this has done is give you an idea of how a sanity system can, or really how a system can influence another system in a really real and a really significant way. So if you were to take the sanity system and try to copy paste it into another gameplay system, it wouldn't work. Just like if you tried to take the sanity system from Call of Cthulhu and just slap it into 5th edition, it wouldn't work. So think about it in terms of how the systems interact. And if you ever hear me talking about things like, well, the systems interact in a certain way, or the gameplay of this system significantly affects the gameplay of this system, usually we're talking about how the core tensions arise. Just like the examples I gave with either the murder hobos or the socially anxious player, or whatever example you can come up with, that's all fine. But the idea is, because there's a tension here that is created that affects you long term, because the sanity affects you long term, because it's always tugging at you, it's always dwindling, it always feels like it's dwindling, and every time you lose a little bit, it feels like you lose a lot more than you actually lose. And the reason, a big part of the reason for that is because it has that snowball effect. So I hope this made sense. I hope the sanity system seems cool to you also, just for personal reasons, really. And I hope you take a look at the document and see for yourself what you think. As always, feel free to ask questions in the comments below. As always, feel free to let me know what you thought. And I would like to do a deeper dive into the design of something like this, but I think just framing it in the context of tension kind of does the trick, because I talk about tension a lot, and that's kind of hopefully a better example of what I mean. Look forward to similar videos coming soon. Also look forward to other DM Academy videos coming soon. Also, look forward to other broader game design videos coming soon. And finally, in the next couple of days, I hope, I'm gonna just do a quick channel update to give everybody an idea of what I'm doing. That's it. Okay, have fun. If you want to use a sanity system in your game, feel free. Since creating this, I have upped the sanity die value to a D10, and then just brought up the amount that I ping for when I make people make sanity checks. I found that it helped. I was finding that people that buffed their wisdom a lot, especially if you're like a cleric or something, there was just too much of a disparity between people who had high wisdom scores and people who didn't. And it was getting to the point where dumping wisdom was basically always the wrong choice. And that's not terrible, but I want dumping wisdom to hurt a little bit, but I don't want it to be always the worst possible thing. So I upped the die to a D10, which helps bring that a little bit more in line, because I still want people who go a lot of wisdom, who invest a lot into wisdom, to have slightly higher sanity values and feel good about that investment. But it was a little bit too much. I might up that sanity die again if I need to, and again just bump all the other numbers in terms of the amount of sanity that you lose in a check up as well. That'll help bring it even more in line. So hopefully this made sense. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I know I've been out of commission for a while. Kind of took last week off. I don't know, just kind of a little vacation. Everything's great. See you guys next week. For real this time.